There's something almost medieval about this. The world's oldest democracy, trading tribute with gold bars and Rolex clocks, all to satisfy the appetite of a man who insists on being treated like an emperor. When I first saw that photo, the Swiss gold bar gleaming on Trump's desk, I felt a kind of a sick déjà vu. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was, in a way, the most honest thing in the whole performance. Today we're looking at what happens when power stops pretending, when trade, sovereignty, and the rules-based order are reduced to a series of shakedowns, and the only way out of it is to pay up, bow down, or finally push back. If you care about how global power actually operates, you'll want to see what happens when the world's patience starts to run out. We'll look at the anatomy of international bullying, the slow death of old alliances, and the strange, necessary courage that it takes to say no, even when saying yes seems easier. And we'll see why, for all the outrage, the real story here is about how long the world can hold its breath before it remembers how to exhale. If you woke up tomorrow and your own country was asked to pay tribute, not for trade, not for peace, but just to satisfy the ego of a specific foreign leader, hint, hint, would you want your government to give up or stand up? Now, I know it's easy to just say, well, of course, we're all just going to stand up and fight, but really? Leave your answers in the comments below. I know that this is a tricky subject. I want to know, is it better to accept humiliation for the sake of relief, or to risk the pain that comes with defiance? Just a quick personal note, my new book, Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies, is finally out in the world now. It's more than just a guide to thinking more clearly. It's about finding calm and clarity in a world that keeps getting louder. If you've ever felt like I do, worn down by the noise and knee-jerk opinions and want practical ways to think things through, especially under pressure, I think you'll find it valuable. Or if you know somebody who could use that kind of support right now, it might actually make a thoughtful Christmas gift. There's also a 24-minute companion podcast that walks through the key ideas, plus a launch video and a special discount for subscribers, all linked down below. And one more thing, maybe you didn't know, but I'm a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field. I'm working on a new course all about AI fluency, essentially making sense of the technology that's shaping the next decade. If you're interested in this space and want to help guide what I build, I'd love to have your input. There's a quick 8-question survey, just a couple of minutes to fill out, and your thoughts will directly influence the content that I build next. The links to everything are below. It would mean so much to hear from you. Thank you for listening, but now let's get back into it. Now, there's a logic to bullying that rarely gets talked about. Every time you give in, every time you hand over your lunch money or your economic leverage, you set the price for the next encounter. The bully doesn't stop because you've been generous. He comes back because you've shown him that it works. Trump's foreign policy in these years was almost childlike in its simplicity. Find the lever, pull it, impose tariffs, watch the chaos, wait for the world to panic, then see who's willing to pay the toll for peace. Sometimes the toll is money. Sometimes it's a compromise on digital regulation or a humiliating concession on sovereignty. Howard Lutnick, Trump's Commerce Secretary, laid it out for the EU in one of those moments of accidental honesty. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, he said, could be lifted, but only if Europe would reconsider its digital rules. In other words, if you let our tech billionaires rule your intranet, we'll let your industry breathe. If you don't, well, enjoy the pain. What fascinates me here isn't the boldness of the demand, but the transparency of the threat. It's not even a negotiation anymore, it's blackmail in broad daylight. Europe's antitrust chief, Teresa Ribera, called it exactly that, blackmail. We respect the rules, she said, but this is our sovereignty. There was a clarity to her words that almost made me hopeful. But clarity in public is not always clarity in private. We've all seen this play before: strong words, principled stances, then slowly a quiet retreat behind closed doors because the threat is real and the cost of standing up is actually immediate. And yet every time a nation gives way, the next demand is even bigger. The European Union is often imagined as a fortress, slow-moving, bureaucratic, but unyielding. The reality is messier. It's a community of nations, and communities are always vulnerable to divide and conquer. Germany, for instance, started making polite noises about loosening digital rules, perhaps dreaming of its own digital renaissance, a chance to become the industrial engine of Europe once again, but for the internet age. Now, there's nothing wrong with this ambition, but in the context of a siege, ambition can look a lot like opportunism, or worse, collaboration. The US administration understood this and pounced on the idea. The same playbook had already worked with South Korea, who quietly shelved its own digital regulations after a bit of targeted economic pressure from the US. The pattern is almost mathematical here. The more fractured the opposition, the cheaper the tribute. It's easy to mock Europe for being slow or indecisive, But the truth is that solidarity, real unflinching solidarity, is actually rare and very expensive. Every country knows its own pain threshold, and the US seems to have made a science out of finding the exact spot where each one of them will crack. But there's a lesson here for anyone trying to understand international relations in an age of shifting powers like now. To think clearly here, we really have to hold two conflicting ideas at once, that rules matter, and that rules only matter as long as you're willing to suffer for them. The EU, for all its regulation and rhetoric, is still learning how to suffer together. Switzerland is supposed to be the grown-up in the room, right? The neutral, the unflappable, but instead it found itself wallowed by a 39% tariff, so severe that it couldn't even get into the negotiating room before the deadlines hit. The price of re-entry was not just economic concessions, but literal treasure. A Rolex desk clock, a gold bar engraved with Trump's presidential number for all the world to see. Corruption in the old sense used to be secret, now it's just out in the open. Its audacity is a kind of shield. If everyone can see it, who can claim to be surprised by it, right? Samuel Benderon, a co-president of the Swiss Social Democrats, called it unacceptable. Daniel Woker, former Swiss ambassador, said there is a sense that it was very close to corruption. The photo on Trump's desk is its own kind of confession. This is what you pay to be left alone. And yet in moments like this, you see how the rules are actually enforced not by courts or treaties, but by shame or its absence. The more public the tribute, the less likely anyone is to act against it. It's the kind of issue that punishes emotional thinking, but also punishes our apathy. Switzerland's parliaments may yet reject the deal, maybe even call a referendum, and the official line is essentially, we haven't sold our souls to the devil. Wow. But that's the kind of thing that you only see when you're worried it might not actually be true. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you subscribe. The House of L is a community of thoughtful, curious people, and you're very welcome here. International order isn't really built on rules. It's built on consent, or the appearance of it. Treaties, institutions, voting rights, they're meant to give a sense of order, but in practice, what holds the system together is the tacit agreement to go along, to not ask too many questions about who's really in charge. Take the spectacle of the G20. The US bars South Africa from attending, not because of a formal vote, not because of some technical infraction, but because it can. Russia is out, South Africa is out, the Palestinians have long been kept at an arm's length. The message is not just exclusion, but also a reminder that membership itself is provisional, and the host holds the velvet ropes. Every invitation is a demonstration of power disguised as hospitality. When South Africa pushed back, we do not appreciate insults from another country about our worth. Fair enough. It was, in diplomatic terms, a dangerous thing to do. Dignity is costly. In the theater of global power, a refusal to play along is rarely met with silence. The world is full of rules, but when you test them, you discover that most are actually there for show. Brazil's Lula da Silva offers another instructive example. Whether you take the details as literal or simply as the shape of the new pattern, ignore the demand, in this case to intervene on behalf of a political rival, and suddenly your nation faces a 50% tariff, just like that. Comply or at least wait out the storm, and those tariffs evaporate as quickly as they appeared. Pain, then reward, like a lesson being administered with all the subtlety of a schoolyard punishment, basically. It's tempting to believe that there is a formula: resist, suffer, capitulate, receive absolution. But there is no formula. There is only chaos, only cycles of endurance. It becomes a test of will, my friends, the world's will, not just between leaders, but between entire societies. Who blinks? Who weathers the pain? Betting that tomorrow's cost will be lower than today's humiliation. Here's the critical moment for anyone trying to see it clearly. Don't just tally up what happens: tariffs, exclusions, angry statements. Ask instead who benefits from the way that we react. The true cost of resistance is always high, obvious headline news. The cost of capitulation is much quieter. It accrues invisibly, like compound interest, until one day you wake up and realize your sovereignty has been spent one small accommodation at a time. To think clearly about power, we really have to notice both sides of the equation: the public punishments and the invisible debts that follow when we choose peace over principle. The next G20 summit is going to be in Miami. By then, the question won't be who is in the room, but how many countries are willing to leave it empty rather than accept humiliation as the price of admission. I don't expect a grand showdown. If history is any guide, most stands are made quietly behind the scenes with just enough ambiguity for everyone to save face. But sometimes something breaks and the quietest countries find their voices. I asked earlier, would you rather accept humiliation or risk pain? But maybe it's just not that simple. Maybe every generation has to relearn what's worth suffering for, and maybe they will make different choices. The rules of cause and effect still apply, even if it takes a little while for the consequences to land. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to understand how to navigate the noise, the hype, and the complexity of our current moment, I think you'd really enjoy my book. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft Lies, and it's hidden for people who want to stay grounded, think clearly, and live in reality even when the world makes that feel impossible. I've also now included a 24-minute podcast episode where we unpack some of the ideas behind Awake in a more relaxed, conversational way, perfect if you prefer to listen while walking, driving, or just taking a break from screens. You'll find the link down below. I'd love to know what you think of it. As always, thank you so much for being here and for thinking through these questions with me. If you like the conversation, do consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. And if you want to stay awake, truly awake in a world of emperors and tribute, you know where to find me.